So, you want to code? Well then, let's code. But wait, what is code or coding? Well, basically, it's the act of writing instructions that will be interpreted and executed by a computer. How is this done? Well, we communicate with the computer through languages that are each designed for a specific area. We have languages that cover the front end interface that people will interact with. We call this our UI. This could be a website, this could be a desktop application, this could be a mobile application. We have languages that communicate with the backend or databases. We have languages like T-SQL. We have languages that interact with the middle portion or the main systems, languages like C#. But I want you guys to think about languages like going to different countries in the world. If you were to try and build a house in a different country, let's say China, you wouldn't be able to just go and get a few people together and instruct them to build a house for you. You would need to learn how to communicate with them in their language, and that would make it easier for you to transfer the instructions over to this group of people. Likewise, if you went to France or Italy, you wouldn't be able to just round up people there and then start speaking to them and giving them instructions. You would need to learn the language to communicate to them in, and then you would be able to pass over that instructions. Why do we write code? Well, simply because computers can perform calculations and tasks more accurately and definitely much, much faster than what we as humans can. All computer systems in the world, or all computerized systems in the world, follow a 3 simple-step process. This 3-step process is known as IPO, or input, process, output. The input phase is where we as the human being enters data into the system. We have many different forms of doing so. We can type something on a keyboard, we can click on something with our mouses, we can cause a mouse gesture like a drag and drop. We can use our touch screens these days to facilitate mouse clicks. We can even control systems using our voice and enter data using our voice. In terms of the process, the system performs a task with the data that was entered by the human being. And like we said, it can do these tasks a lot more accurately and much, much faster than what we as humans can. But if a system didn't give you an answer once it did some kind of a calculation, it would pretty much be pointless. Therefore, all computer systems must provide some type of output or feedback. And feedback is given to the user on the task that was performed, either the initial answer or a message stating that the process had failed, it succeeded, or there was some kind of a problem. So with that in mind, guys, I think you understand enough about code for us to begin with what we are doing today. So what exactly will we be doing? Well, we are firstly going to be setting up your machine to create a web page. So long as you have a Windows-based device, Windows 7, Windows 10, or even as far back as Windows XP, it does not matter so long as you have a Windows-based device. All you really need to know how to do is creating a folder, how to type out some text, so how to use a keyboard and a mouse, as well as perhaps an advanced topic called copying and pasting. But I'm sure you guys are all too familiar with that. So we'll start off today by setting up your machine. We will then be creating a simple web page with HTML. We'll then be creating a calculator with JavaScript, and then we will be styling your web page with CSS. Okay guys, so let's begin. What we'll firstly need to do is create a folder on our file system somewhere. So either on our desktop or in our My Documents folder, in the Downloads folder, or somewhere that we'll remember where to go. So I'm going to put mine on one of my external drives. I'm going to firstly start off by creating a new folder and calling it My Website. Because believe it or not, every single website is nothing more than a folder that is containing some files. So inside of our folder, we are going to create a new text file or a text document, and we'll call this my web page or home. But then we need to change the extension. Now the extension is this part that you see at the end of it, .txt. If you do not see that portion at all, you need to go to the view menu at the top, and then there are 3 checkboxes, and one of them says file name extension. Yours is probably turned off, and that's why you can't see the .txt. You will need to simply just click on that and turn it on. We then have to go back and rename this file, because we don't want it to open up as a text file, but rather as an HTML file. Now when we change the file name extension, Windows will warn us that if we do change the extension to something that it cannot read, it might become unusable. It asks us if we do want to change it. We simply say yes. As soon as we do that, we see that the icon changed from a notepad type of icon to whatever your default browser is on your current machine. Let us double click on this file just to make sure that it does open inside of a web browser. And it does exactly that, but there is no content on the inside. So let us simply right click on this home.html. We'll go down to open with, and we are going to select choose another app. We then need to scroll down this list and find the one that says Notepad. You'll click on that and click on OK. However, I'm going to use a different version of Notepad. It's simply called Notepad 2, and that just allows me to zoom in a little better so that you can see my code. However, Notepad, Notepad 2, Notepad++, Microsoft Word, or even Microsoft Word Pad, you will be able to do this on either one of those programs. So with home.html opened up inside of a text editor, we're going to start by typing out tags. And HTML tags are the sharp brackets, which you can get on your keyboard by holding down Shift and then pressing the key on the right hand side of M. That will give you a less than symbol, and the one to the right hand side of that gives you the greater than symbol. And these two together is going to be known as a tag. For now, let us just type out HTML inside the one tag. We're going to press enter, and then we are going to type out the exact same thing, HTML, closing bracket or greater than symbol. But the difference in this tag is that it's going to have a / at the beginning. Now, why is that? It's pretty much because the first one is denoted as the opening tag, and the one that has the / the / in itself means closing. So open HTML and close HTML. And anything that we put between this is considered HTML. So like any good coder would write their first line as hello world, we simply just press Ctrl S on our keyboard to save it, or click on the save icon, perhaps even go to file and save. But once we have that in place, we can refresh our browser windows and we should be able to see that text. Now HTML is actually pretty simple, as you guys have been doing it already. As an example, if I asked you, how do you make something bold inside of WhatsApp, in a WhatsApp message or a WhatsApp status? You'd simply put stars at the beginning and at the end. If you wanted to make it italics, you would probably put an underscore at the beginning and an underscore at the end. And all of the text between it would start slanting or go into italics mode. Now HTML is actually the very same. However, we don't use special symbols, as the symbols is just text. So what we do, we wrap our text in tags. So if you wanted to make your text bold, you would use a B tag. And if you save that and refresh your page, you see it goes bold. If you wanted to make it underline, you would use the U tag. Save your work, refresh the browser, you see it's underlined. And if you wanted to make it italics, you'd put it in I tags. So understand that each tag in itself has some special meaning, that it will format the object on the inside with whatever this does, as we can see over here. So usually on our pages, we have this tag called an H1, which is usually at the top of our page. And H1 means a heading of the biggest size, as we can see. Let us put in an H2 tag below that. And H2 will be a heading as well, but of a slightly smaller size. Okay. There are certain tags which we call self-closing. An example of it is an HR tag, or perhaps even a BR tag. A BR tag is a break, a line break that causes the separation that you see here. Although some tags have the break built in by default, like headings. But HR is a horizontal rule, which means that it simply puts a straight line across your page. Okay. We have quite a few different tags, and we must remember that HTML simply just puts things onto our page for us. So, as an example, we have an input tag, which is self-closing. And if you want to take a look at what that does, it simply gives you a text box that you can start typing in. Okay. However, certain HTML is defined by what we call attributes, a describing value that changes the way that the initial tag acts. So an input tag is for putting in inputs, a text box, as we have seen. But what if we wanted to enter just numbers? Well, fairly simply, we will use an input, but we will put on the attribute of type, and we will say that type is equal to, we then have quotation marks, and inside of those quotation marks we'll put the word number. And if we save that, refresh our page, we see that another text box appears, but now there's arrows over here, and we can type out numbers. We can use our keyboard as well, and if we type out letters from our keyboard, as you can see, nothing actually comes up on the screen. So it only allows numbers. There's quite a few of these inputs, so I'm going to copy and paste just a few of them over here, and I'm going to change the type. So we have a default text input, we have a number input, perhaps we have a radio button, or a checkbox. Perhaps we want a button. Or we want to go to our file system. There's some advanced ones like a date picker. I think it's just date. And we even have things like color pickers. So simply adding in an attribute on top of a normal tag can change that item quite drastically. Let's go and take a look at the effects of this. Radio buttons, checkboxes, buttons, a choose file button, date pickers, as we can see, and then even a color picker. So you can choose different colors, and that'll be the color selected. Okay. So now that you guys know that, let's put in another HR just to separate all our content, I beg your pardon. And then I want to create another H1 tag at the bottom, which is going to be our actual calculator. Now for this calculator, we're not really going to design a full-blown interface that resembles a calculator, but what we are rather going to do is put together 4 buttons that allow us to perform the calculations. So we're going to start with a button tag. A button tag is another way to create a button. Remember to always have your closing tag. I tell you what, guys, let me cause some separation here so it's slightly easier for you to see. There we go. Hopefully that's a bit better. And inside of this button, we'll say add. Now if we refresh our page, we can see the button appears, add, and we can click on it, and click on it, but nothing actually happens. Okay, let us put in another tag or another button. We'll call it subtract. Another button, multiply, and one last button for divide. Refresh our page, we see all 4 buttons appear, but again, they are all clickable, but nothing actually happens when you click on them. The reason behind this being is that HTML is simply used to put things on our page. It is known as a semantic markup language that helps us to place items on the page that we can see and interact with. So we can interact with these, we can see them, but they don't do anything just yet. We do need to write the language called JavaScript to accomplish that. Okay, so JavaScript being a different language than HTML, although it's written inside or side by side with HTML, they do live together, and often web pages do need JavaScript to be interactive. So to create some JavaScript, we simply need to create a script tag at the top of our page. Opening and closing script tag. And whatever we put inside of this is going to run as JavaScript. So just to test that everything is working, we will put in an alert, quotation marks inside of those brackets, and then I'm just going to say testing 1, 2, 3, semicolon at the end of that line, save my page, and now when I refresh, I get a pop-up that says this page says testing 1, 2, 3, and when I click on OK, the rest of my page loads up. So I know that my JavaScript is working. However, I don't want this to fire off every time I refresh the page, as that's exactly what will happen. So because this was just a testing line, I am going to remove it. So how do we write the code that is going to help our calculator come into be? Well, we need to create something called a function, and a function is a reusable piece of code that we can call upon by its name that will do the work that it involves. So I'm going to call my function add to numbers, or let's just call it add. Open and close brackets, normal round brackets, but then we're also going to hold down shift and open and close squiggly brackets or curly brackets, and those are next to your P key on the keyboard. So once we have a pair of round brackets, a pair of squiggly brackets, you put your mouse cursor between those, press enter twice, and now you have some space to write your actual code. Now the code here is going to be reused for the other 3 buttons. I'm going to type out all of the code and then I am going to explain it. So we would usually start off with something called a prompt, and a prompt is going to pop up a dialog inside of your web browser and ask the user a question or ask them to do something. So here we're going to say, please enter the first number, and whatever the user enters in, I want to save into a variable called number or first number. I'm then going to copy and paste that line below itself and simply change this to second number. Now let's see what happens when we run this code. Actually, let me finish the block first and then we'll test it to see that it is working. So var first number is equal to prompt, please enter the first number. Var second number is equal to a prompt, please enter the second number. We then need to perform the calculation. So I want to create a variable called the answer, and the answer is going to get its value from taking the first number and plussing it with the second number. Pretty straightforward, eh guys? Now all we are going to do is alert back to the user what the answer was. Now let's save this and try to run it. We refresh our page, we can click on any one of the buttons and oh, it does not work. This is interesting. Well, you may have remembered me saying that when we write some piece of code, we often need to call upon it to execute its functionality, and nowhere did we do that. Now we want to call upon the function called add when we click on the add button. So let us go down on the HTML page and we'll find the add button, and we are going to add in an attribute just like we did here for these inputs. The attribute here, however, is going to be called onClick, which is actually an event. Now this is known as event-driven development, where we call upon functionality when an event happens. So here we're simply going to say onClick, and we're going to call upon the add function that we created at the top. Okay, let us click on the save button and refresh our page. And now when we click on add, it asks us to enter the first number. I'm typing out 12. I click on OK. It asks me to enter the second number. I'm typing out 13. I click on OK. And the answer of 12 plus 13 is 1213. Obviously that's wrong, right guys? Now this is known as a logical error, as the system performed the calculation, but the answer that we were expecting was not what we had gotten. So somewhere in our code something went wrong, and this is simply the adding of strings together instead of numbers. So it added words together instead of trying to add together numbers. If I can just show you another example of that, if I were to say IT as the first number and then CA as the second number, it would come back as ITCA. So it's just adding the two together or putting them next to each other. However, we want to add actual numbers. So the way to change this, guys, is that I normally take my first number and my second number, where I am adding them together, and I put them inside of brackets. And the reason that I put them inside of brackets is because I need to add one more plus sign at the beginning of that number, or at the beginning of the variable rather, I should say. So plus first number inside of brackets gets added to plus second number inside of brackets. And the plus sign that we are adding here simply takes whatever that text was that the person types out and tries to convert it into a number. Now if we try and run this, 12 plus 13 is equal to 25. Okay. Now to add in the rest of our functions, seeing that we are running out of time, I want to simply copy and paste this, and we're going to change around the implementation ever so slightly. So just to make things a little neater, I'm going to put my mouse cursor at the beginning of where we see the vars and the alert, and I'm simply going to press tab once to cause some indentation. Now it is, because I'm so far zoomed in, hopefully you guys can still see that, it looks a bit better, but that is what your code should look like once you have indented it by pressing tab at the beginning of the line. So with this done, I'm going to copy all of that and paste it below itself. Now instead of it being the add function as well, let's call it the subtract function. And instead of adding the two numbers together, let's put a minus sign to minus them. We must now also just remember that down here, we need to add in the onClick event. We'll do the same thing again. So copy and paste, multiply, and instead of the plus sign between them, we put a star. The star means multiply. One last paste, the divide method, or the divide function, sorry, and instead of the plus sign between them or the minus sign or the star, we put in a forward slash. A forward slash means divide. Let us just tie up our events one more time. So over here we have the onClick event, and this is going to call upon the multiply function, and inside of the divide button, onClick, oopsie, divide. And with that done, guys, you should have a full-blown calculator that can now be used. So if we say subtract, 25 minus 12 is equal to 13. If we said multiply, 12 times 13 is 156. And if we divided, let's say 60 by 12, we get the answer of 5. Quite an interesting one. What do you think would happen if we divided by 0? So 5 divided by 0, infinity. So no errors actually thrown. You just get the answer back as infinity. So that is JavaScript. Writing functions and then calling the functions when something happens. I would like to do one last example just to save some time. I see it's already over 20 minutes that this presentation is going. So let us chop it down and add in one more function here with the color picker, and this will change our background. So let us put in an onChange event, and what we want to do here is document dot body dot style dot background equals to this dot value. So whatever value comes out of the color picker, it will try to change the background color of the page. Let's see if that works. Unfortunately, it is not. Document.body.style.background. Why is that not working? Oh, it seems I spelled style wrong here. There we go. My bad, guys. So now, if we do change the color, how cool is that? Okay, so that's all we have time for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this little demo. Please know that there are many different languages that we learn at ITCA, like I have mentioned this morning. Today we have covered HTML and some JavaScript, some slight CSS, although we didn't really get into the nitty-gritty over there, some styling. There's database languages, there's web languages, there's mobile languages, there's system languages, there's cross-platform languages. There's so many different languages that you can learn. but languages is simply a means to communicate with a computer. So if you'd like to learn about talking to a computer and instructing it to perform certain tasks for you, please contact our sales team and our student advisors. They can definitely give you the heads up and the full rundown as to all of our course details and what will be involved if you join us here at ITCA. So once again, thank you guys for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. My name is Mikhail. I'll see you guys on the other side.